last night at about 3 a.m. I finished Silent Hill F, so now I can give my review on it. I only did the main ending first, the one that you get for completing the game for the first time. I didn't go back and do any of the other endings because that just seems like a big fucking chore and I don't want to do any of that. So I'm just gonna give my review on it, give some critique, and give you my opinion on the game as a whole. Now, I love the Silent Hill franchise. It is one of my favorite horror franchises besides Resident Evil. I think the way they set things up is great. I think the whole idea of it just being a personal hell for someone is really cool. And I recently played Silent Hill 2 on here, so if you want to go check that out, I'll leave a link for it. Silent Hill F, however, kind of goes into a different approach. It does have the same themes as the other Silent Hills do, where you're a person and you're going through the whole town that's covered in fog, you're fighting monsters, everyone's pretty much out to get you, you're going through a bunch of suffering and pain just to kind of get to the very end of things and maybe have some closure or maybe overcome something. Overall, I thought it was kind of cool. I thought it was a unique take on the whole franchise now that's taking place in Japan rather than the original Silent Hill town, which was a bit controversial for some people just because the game is called Silent Hill. You would expect it to take place in the town or something, but I feel like when you played this game, this kind of felt like a little bit of a soft reboot to the franchise just because maybe it puts the idea that this is a whole phenomenon happening. It's not just limited to the Silent Hill town, or gives some insight to what's going to happen in the next Silent Hill game, how it all connects. So I think it was a fine game. I'm glad they at least took some risk there by trying to incorporate some different elements to it. I think it's a great idea. I think more games should do that. Maybe instead of focusing on a certain spot for like all your games, especially with such a big franchise like Silent Hill is, that they go for a different approach and do different locations. And that's what Resident Evil does. And they do it well. So I think this could be a good start potentially. I don't know. But there were some flaws that I will go into because of how drastic the changes were, because I did like the story. I thought the character had a very Silent Hill-esque experience going through a big personal hell, going through the different areas, fighting all the monsters, trying to go find her friends. It was pretty cool. I liked that part. There was just so many other aspects though that made it take away from the experience of it being a horror game, but I feel like I could give this game a bit more praise in that department if this wasn't a Silent Hill game. If it was called something else, then I could totally understand it, but with it just having that big name attached to it, it kind of makes people compare it to the actual Silent Hill. So there's some flaws there, and I'll just get into it real quick. So let me just get into the big one right now, the combat. I am not a big fan of the combat in this game. They added stuff like the stamina bar, they had a giant health bar. I was playing on the hardest difficulty. I played that for the combat and for the puzzles, which I'll get into the puzzles in a second, but the combat was just so annoying more than anything. It kind of took away from the fact that it's a horror game and just made it feel like a mob gauntlet that you have to go through in order to get into the next place. And the combat's very cookie cutter. It's just dodge, heavy attack, light attack, counter. People say it's similar to like the Souls game mechanics, which I can kind of see that. I've been seeing a lot of games do this nowadays just because of how popular the From Software games are. So they try and incorporate that into every game that has any combat mechanic whatsoever, which I'm not a fan of. The reason I like Silent Hill to begin with was because it was a survival psychological horror game. You did not have much to use. Like with guns and health items, those things were scarce. You had to really salvage what you could. You could not shoot anything. You had to be very careful. It felt more scary to go into a certain area and see a few mobs that could potentially kill you in 1 to 2 hits when you have almost 0 bullets. You had to be very careful. I think that was the one thing Silent Hill did best. It was the idea that you have to be on your toes at all times. With this new combat mechanic, however, it kind of bypasses that just because once you learn the dodging mechanic and the parrying, and if you have enough weapons at your disposal, it kind of negates that whole feeling just because there's probably so many enemies in this game that you have to fight them no matter what in order to move on. So I was like walking around throughout the map, and whenever I got to a spot that was blocked off because I had to fight certain enemies, I'm like, okay, let me just do this real quick. It's gonna probably beat the shit out of me over and over again, and then I'm gonna kill them, get to the next spot, go fight a secret boss, and then move on, go fight more enemies. That was kind of the trend I was looking at in that moment. It got annoying pretty quickly. I was so pissed. Every so often I had to fight like the freaking monsters that run on all fours. I hated those things. They kept beating the shit out of me. And people say it's probably a skill issue. It's not really that. It's just annoying how all these enemies keep piling on over and over again, especially in crowded spaces that make it hard to progress through the game or make it difficult to want to push forward because of how constant that they're being fed in your face. So that was a big complaint of mine. And the one drawback that I had with the combat was just how much stamina that the attacks took. I could probably only get 3 or 4 hits in before Hinako, the main girl, was catching your breath, acting like you just ran a marathon. It was horrible because once I ran out of stamina, I could not dodge at all. I was just at the mercy of the enemies, and they were just probably beating the shit out of me, and I just died over and over again. It was the worst. I was just so tired of it. I was debating on putting the combat to the story mode just so I can kind of ease through it, but I wanted to give the combat a chance. I know that they are focusing on that, especially with how many enemies that are in this game, so I wanted to give it the chance that I think it should have gotten. So, not a big fan of the combat. I think they could have just kept it minimalistic, and it could have been way better than what they were trying to go for. So that's my complaint on the combat. Next thing is the puzzles. Silent Hill always has these crazy puzzles. I was playing on the hardest difficulty for them, and the puzzles were not that hard. I didn't really have to think about them. I brute forced pretty much all of them, and I got them done within like a few tries. So the puzzles were a little bit lackluster. I think they were a little bit easier than what they should have been, especially for being on the hardest difficulty, because they try and set you up with like all these riddles, all these different puzzle pieces, when really you can just try every single possible combination, because it's usually like a combination of 3 or 4 things, and then that's it. So I wasn't really a big fan of the puzzles. I kind of got through them pretty quickly. I think it would have been cool if they added a tiny bit more, maybe added a little bit more challenge to it, because I'm gonna be honest, they were not that fun. I was kind of looking forward to the puzzle aspect of things to kind of put my brain to work, but it just was not there. Last thing I kind of want to go into is the atmosphere as well as the enemies. I personally like the atmosphere. I thought it was really cool. I'm a big fan of Japan stuff. I thought the enemies were really cool. They kind of look like something out of a Junji Ito manga, which I thought was a really nice touch. I think that's something that fits well in this universe for Silent Hill, especially if it's going to be in Japan. But there weren't really that many different enemy combinations. Mainly it was just the mannequin dolls, the pregnant lady ones, the ones that run on all fours, and I guess the big guys. There wasn't that many enemy types, so that's very similar to what we've seen in the past with other Silent Hill games. But I thought the bosses were really cool. I thought the final boss that I did in my playthrough was cool. I think the secret bosses that you do for other endings are really, really nice. There's a lot to be made there. So I think they really did a good job designing all these characters. I even checked out the art book that I got for pre-ordering it, and I was actually really impressed. Looking at that stuff kind of made me think it came out of my nightmare, so I was pretty impressed with the character design as well as the enemy types. I think they fit in the atmosphere very well, especially with the story that this game is trying to tell, because once you go through all the endings of the game, you can kind of get a better grasp of what has happened in the town that you're in, what your character has gone through, and how everything connects as a whole. It doesn't really go into detail how it connects with the main franchise, but I don't think that was the point. Overall though, I think story-wise and atmosphere-wise, they exceeded expectations in that front. So do I think Silent Hill F is a good game? I would say if you're new to the franchise and you've never played a Silent Hill game before, then yeah, I would say you can pick it up. It's not bad. It's not as confusing as some of the other games make it out to be. It's kind of a fresh start, and then you can kind of branch off into those other games. So if you're starting out, then I would suggest you could pick it up. If you're a Silent Hill fan like I am though, it does tie into the canon, so you could pick it up if you're into that story stuff. But if you're not a big fan of the combat aspect of things that was different from Silent Hill games in the past, then maybe it's not for you. It just kind of feels like a big old mosh pit of enemies that you have to fight over and over again, rather than it just being a psychological horror type Silent Hill game that we've seen in the past. So I'll just leave it at that. You can decide for yourself if you want to buy it. That's pretty much it. That's all I wanted to talk about. Look forward to the next game. I'll probably play it on Sunday. So yeah, and that's pretty much it for me. Thank you for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. I'll talk to you later. See ya.